Welcome to Venice. The year is 1348. You are standing in the most powerful city in the Mediterranean, a place where East meets West, where fortunes are made overnight, and where the smell of spices from distant lands fills the air. This is not just any city. This is the serene republic, La Serenissima, a trading empire built entirely on water. Look around you. There are no horses here, no carriages, no dusty roads. Instead, there are canals, hundreds of them, winding between palaces and warehouses like liquid streets. Gondolas glide silently beneath marble bridges, carrying merchants, nobles, and goods from every corner of the known world. Venice has no farmland, no natural resources, nothing but water and ambition. And yet, somehow, this city of about 120,000 people has become one of the richest places on Earth. The harbor is alive with activity. Ships arrive daily from Constantinople, from Alexandria, from the distant ports of the Black Sea. They bring silk, pepper, cinnamon, and gold. They bring news from the East, stories of distant kingdoms, rumors of war and wonder. Venetian merchants have built trading posts across the entire Mediterranean, and their influence stretches from London to Beijing. The wealth here is almost beyond imagination. A single shipment of spices can make a family rich for generations. A single bad investment can destroy them just as quickly. This is a city of gamblers, of risk-takers, of men who believe that fortune favors the bold. But something else is coming, something that no amount of gold can stop. In the crowded ports of the East, in cities that Venice trades with every single day, a shadow is spreading. Sailors are whispering about a terrible sickness, a disease that strikes without warning and leaves entire towns empty. The merchants of Venice have heard these rumors, of course, but rumors are common in the trading business. Ships come and go. Life continues. No one here truly believes that anything could threaten this magnificent city. After all, Venice has survived wars, floods, and famines. Venice always survives. What the people walking these streets right now do not know, what they cannot possibly imagine, is that the ships arriving in their harbor are carrying more than just silk and spices. They are carrying something that will change this city, and all of Europe, forever. To understand what is about to happen here, you first need to understand what Venice actually is. This is not a kingdom ruled by a single man. This is not a duchy controlled by noble birth. Venice is something entirely different, something that would not look out of place in the modern world. This is a republic, a merchant republic, where power belongs to those who have proven themselves in business and trade. The man who sits at the top is called the Doge, and his name is Andrea Dandolo. He is a scholar, a historian, and by all accounts a man of great intelligence. But here is the thing about being Doge of Venice. It sounds impressive, and the title carries enormous prestige, but the Doge is not a king. He cannot make decisions alone. He cannot declare war or sign treaties without approval. The real power in Venice belongs to the Great Council, an assembly of wealthy merchant families who have controlled this city for generations. These families, names like Contarini, Morosini, and Giustiniani, have built their fortunes through trade, and they guard their influence jealously. In Venice, money talks, and money votes. The heart of this city is the Piazza San Marco, a grand square dominated by the magnificent Basilica of St. Mark. The basilica is covered in gold mosaics that glitter in the sunlight, a testament to the wealth that Venice has accumulated over centuries of trade. Next to it stands the Doge's Palace, an architectural masterpiece of pink marble and white stone, where the business of government takes place behind closed doors. But the true engine of Venetian power is not here in the square. It is across the city, in a place called the Arsenal. This is the largest shipyard in the world, a massive complex where thousands of workers build the galleys that carry Venetian goods across the seas. The Arsenal can produce a fully equipped warship in a single day, an industrial feat that no other nation can match. This is why Venice dominates the Mediterranean. This is why merchants from every country come here to do business. And this is also, unfortunately, why the city is so vulnerable. The same trade routes that bring wealth to Venice, the same ships that connect this city to Constantinople and Kaffa and Alexandria, are about to bring something else entirely. The roads that made Venice rich are about to become the highways of catastrophe. The first warnings came in whispers. Sailors returning from the east spoke of cities along the Black Sea, where something terrible was happening. In Kaffa, a Genoese trading colony on the coast of Crimea, entire neighborhoods had gone silent. The stories seemed too awful to be true. People would feel fine in the morning and be gone by nightfall. Swellings would appear under the arms and in the groin, dark and painful, followed by fever, chills, and then the end. Venetian merchants heard these tales, but the east was far away, and business had to continue. Ships kept arriving. Cargo kept moving. And then, in the early months of 1348, the sickness arrived in Venice itself. It came the way everything came to this city, by water, carried on the very ships that had made Venice wealthy beyond measure. No one knew exactly which vessel brought it. No one understood how it spread. All they knew was that people were getting sick, first in the neighborhoods near the harbor, then spreading outward through the crowded streets and cramped houses where ordinary Venetians lived their lives. Life in Venice, before this moment, followed predictable rhythms. The city woke early. Fishermen headed out into the lagoon before dawn, while merchants opened their shops as the first light touched the canals. Workers at the Arsenal began their shifts, hammering and sawing, building the ships that were the lifeblood of the Republic. The wealthy lived in magnificent palaces along the Grand Canal, surrounded by servants, dressed in silks and furs imported from distant lands. They ate well, drank fine wines, and conducted business in elegant counting houses filled with ledgers and contracts. The poor, meanwhile, crowded into small apartments in the interior of the city, entire families sharing a single room, working long hours for modest wages. They ate bread, fish, and whatever vegetables they could afford. Entertainment for everyone, rich and poor alike, meant festivals, religious processions, and the endless spectacle of the city itself. Venice was never boring. There was always something to see, someone to meet, some new ship arriving from some exotic port. The authorities tried to respond. Venetian officials were practical men, businessmen at heart, and they understood that this crisis threatened everything. Ships that showed signs of sickness were ordered to anchor away from the city for a period of 40 days before anyone could come ashore. This practice would later become known as quarantine, from the Italian word for 40, and it was one of the first organized public health measures in European history. But it was not enough. The disease moved faster than anyone could track, spreading through the dense neighborhoods where people lived close together, where sanitation was poor, and where there was simply no way to isolate the sick from the healthy. By spring, what had started as scattered cases had become something far worse. By the middle of 1348, Venice had become unrecognizable. The canals that once bustled with gondolas and trading vessels now sat eerily quiet. The markets that had overflowed with goods from every corner of the world stood empty, their stalls abandoned. The great merchant families who had controlled the city for generations watched helplessly as their servants, their business partners, and their own relatives fell ill one after another. Historians estimate that Venice lost somewhere between 60 and 70% of its population in the span of just a few months. Think about that for a moment. Out of every 10 people walking the streets at the beginning of the year, only 3 or 4 would still be alive by the end. Entire family lines vanished. Businesses that had operated for a century disappeared overnight. The social fabric of the city, woven over generations, was torn apart in ways that seemed impossible to repair. The government of Venice, to its credit, did not collapse. While other cities across Europe fell into chaos and disorder, the Venetian Republic kept functioning. The Great Council continued to meet. Officials continued to make decisions. Special committees were formed to deal with the crisis, organizing the removal of the sick, the disposal of remains, and the distribution of whatever resources were available. This was remarkable. In many places, authority simply broke down. Courts stopped operating. Churches closed their doors. Neighbors turned against neighbors out of fear. But Venice held together, not perfectly, not without suffering, but enough to maintain some semblance of order. The same discipline and organization that had built the arsenal, that had managed a trading empire spanning thousands of miles, was now being applied to survival itself. The church offered explanations, though none of them brought much comfort. Many believed this was divine punishment for the sins of humanity. Priests led processions through the streets, calling for repentance and prayer. Others looked for someone to blame, and in some cities across Europe, that blame fell on outsiders, on minorities, on anyone who seemed different. Fear does terrible things to people. But even as the crisis reached its worst, even as the losses mounted day after day, there were those who refused to give up hope. Doctors continued treating the sick, knowing they might become victims themselves. Neighbors cared for neighbors. The bonds of community, strained to their breaking point, somehow held. And slowly, as autumn turned to winter, the worst began to pass. Venice survived. It was smaller, it was wounded, but it survived. And in the years that followed, something remarkable happened. While other cities across Europe struggled to recover, Venice rebuilt itself faster than anyone expected. The same merchant spirit that had created this empire in the first place now drove its resurrection. Trade routes reopened. Ships returned to the harbor. New families rose to fill the gaps left by those who had perished. Within a generation, Venice was once again one of the most powerful cities in the Mediterranean. But the experience of 1348 left a permanent mark on the Venetian mind. The city had learned, in the most painful way possible, that disease could be as dangerous as any enemy army. And so Venice became a pioneer in something entirely new: the science of public health. In 1403, the Republic established the Lazaretto Vecchio, a dedicated island where travelers and goods suspected of carrying illness could be isolated before entering the city. This was the first permanent quarantine station in the world, a concept that would eventually spread across Europe and become a standard practice in ports everywhere. Venice also created some of the earliest health boards, government bodies specifically tasked with monitoring disease and implementing preventive measures. These innovations did not come from abstract theory. They came from experience, from the memory of what had happened when a city of 120,000 people was brought to its knees by an invisible enemy. Venice never forgot. If you walk through Venice today, you are walking through a city shaped by that terrible year. The Basilica of San Marco still stands, its golden mosaics glittering just as they did nearly 7 centuries ago. The Doge's palace still watches over the lagoon. The canals still wind between buildings that have witnessed more history than most nations. Churches were built in gratitude for deliverance. Art was created to process grief and celebrate survival. The Venice that tourists visit today, the Venice of gondolas and carnival masks and romantic bridges, carries within it the DNA of 1348. This city exists because it refused to disappear. It adapted. It learned. It endured. And that, perhaps, is the greatest lesson Venice has to offer. Empires rise and fall. Fortunes come and go. But a city that knows how to survive, a city that turns tragedy into wisdom, can last forever.